Morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Much better, slightly more mobile, which is why. Good morning, good morning. Let's begin. We've got a long day ahead of us. Good morning, good morning. Sumit, good morning, long time. Okay, good morning. Hi, Krishna, good morning. So, we are on social sectors covering education, skill, and human development. And in the context of education, skill, and human development, we would also be understanding India's population problem, and skill would be school education and higher education. Now, we are now currently focused on education. We had done an overview in terms of why it is important for us to focus on education. We would be looking at the larger policy, and then we will be doing a core analysis of certain issues that come up. Now, the first and foremost question that we have is, what is our education policy? Now, for that, we will first look at it in terms of an international arrangement. We have to first understand what our SDG goals are, because we quote them in the exams. So, SDG goal number 4 largely deals with what is called quality education. Okay. And we need to know a few markers of these. I don't need you to know 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, but I broadly need you to know that what are our SDG goals and what have we done in a good manner. And second, of course, is our constitutional provisions, our legal provisions, our bodies, etc., that are all involved in education. Okay. Now, let us start. Broadly speaking, where does it all fit in? The first SDG goal under education largely has to deal with school education, and specifically about how all boys and girls have to complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, which would lead to effective learning outcomes. This is the important part. So you have, the first one is for both primary and secondary, where education should be free, should be equitable, and should be qualitative, and therefore lead to good learning outcomes. In education, whenever we use the word learning outcomes, it simply means that if a student is in class 5, what is an average class 5 student supposed to know? And does this student also know the same effectively? That is called a learning outcome. So our SDG goals are mapped around this. Now, how SDG works is, there will be a goal, and then that goal will have a specific target for India. That India has set this goal for itself in this manner to be completed by 2030. Okay. So the larger goal says all boys and girls, primary and secondary education, free, equitable, and qualitative. Great, makes sense, outstanding. But what does India take out of it? How does India customize SDG goals to our own understanding? That's the idea. So how it works is one, India has set three sub goals around this. First is 100% adjusted net enrollment ratio, which simply means on an average, the number of people who are enrolled in this grade. Okay. For classes 1 to 8 should be 100%. This is our goal. Okay. And what is our current status? Our current status for this is approximately 96.5%. Now, I've picked up this data from the Niti Aayog SDG India Index, which to my mind is the most accurate and authorized simply because it ranks SDG performance in India global, nationally and state-wise. Are we okay with this? Yes? Good. So this is what our data set is. Basically, 100% of students should be able to attend what is called classes 1 to 8. Now, what is adjusted net enrollment ratio? I'll keep telling you. It simply is nothing but the percentage of children in the official age group of classes 1 to 8. It could be primary, it could be anything, who are enrolled in that level or a higher level. Okay. The reason they look at adjusted and not just net enrollment ratio is net enrollment ratio is about just age appropriate for that age. Adjusted is sometimes people, progress in education early. Sometimes they skip levels of education. So that is why. Which is one of the reasons why ANER is a very good data set. What ANER, what ANER does is, it actually captures what is age appropriate population participating in education while accounting for early progression. ये समझ आ रहा है कि कोई बच्चा अगर जल्दी 7th में पहुंच गया तो वो भी अच्छी बात है ना, उसका डेटा भी हमें काउंट करना चाहिए. Clear on this? Make sense? Good. In fact, our ANER for primary education is about 99%. We've done really, really well, largely because of, right to education and midday meal and etc. etc. Okay. Second, reducing your average dropout rates. Okay. Generally, we will look at dropout rates between classes 9 to 10. The answer to why this happens mostly is two. One is a gender reason, the other is a non-gender reason. The gender reason is that women will often in this age group start experiencing puberty, will start experiencing menstruation, and the lack of washrooms can often lead to them not attending schools, or the stigma that is unfortunately socially attached to this biological development, which is absolutely natural. The second non-gendered reason as to why you will generally see dropouts happening a fair bit is because children come of working age. If you remember our discussion from Article 23, when we had discussed child labor and I had discussed the range of ages that children can participate in. Remember that part very carefully. Exactly around that. So, if you're above 18, you can work in any manner, hazardous or non hazardous. If you are below 40, then you cannot work no matter what the case might be. The only exception is audiovisual entertainment or you're working in a family owned business. And the conditions are that your academics cannot be hampered. But then between 14 to 15, you cannot work in a hazardous industry like inflammatory industry, explosives industries, things like that. Correct? So children generally come off working age in a non-hazardous capacity around this time. And given the state of poverty in our country, a lot of children work with their parents. That the parents are construction workers, for example, and the children might not be construction workers at the construction site. They may be working at a tea stall next to the construction site. So technically, they're also working. And all the members of the family work every day so that the family is able to eat a decent meal on a daily basis. Do we understand this? Do we understand how this works? That is the broad principle, which is why you look at average dropouts in this range classes 9 to 10. There's actually a lot of thought behind this. Now, the target that we've generally set for ourselves is about 7.6%. Today, India is about 12.6%. Okay. The maths is very simple. About 98-99% end up in join primary school. About 65% are in secondary school. And about 30% or so finally end up enrolling in college, age appropriate. So there is a massive drop off for students at every level, which can often be understood to be fairly concerning in their own right. No. The third data set we generally look at is a data set of proficiency till class 8. Now, if you think of it, what is proficiency? How do you measure it? The idea behind the data is the percentage of students in class 8th who have been able to achieve a minimum level of proficiency, which means academic understanding, academic knowledge, in terms of what are the nationally defined learning outcomes that you are supposed to attain by this grade. Let's say a simple thing, a class 8 student should be able to perform simple and intermediate levels of mathematical operations. Do you agree that a class 8 student should know basics of calculations and BODMAS and complex multiplications and divisions? Right? No matter where in class 8 you're studying, you've gone to the fanciest private school, you've gone to the most basic government school. A class 8 student should be able to solve, let us say, at least linear equation, basic Find the value of x. It's not difficult. Or basic geometry they must be able to understand, which is called mensuration. So these are called proficiencies. So you decide that X student, any student in this country, no matter what school they go to, they should be able to do this by class this. Which is why in the newspapers you would have often heard of ASER, Annual Status of Education Report, which basically monitors learning outcomes. So you will often hear in the newspapers that they will say that a class 6 student is not able to perform class 3 student tasks. Correct? So that is nothing but a proficiency problem. That there are certain standards that have been set. Those standards do not add up. Clear? Now the target that we set for ourselves is about 77.2%. Sorry, the target is 100%. Our current achievement or our current state of affairs is 77.2%. Are we okay with this? Correct? Good. The second sustainable development goal that we should know under all circumstances that is very relevant is you have to ensure that all boys and girls have access to quality early childhood development, early childhood care, pre-primary education, so that they are ready for what is called the next stage, primary education. Are we clear on this? Simple enough. Do we understand this? Yes. So, early childhood care and education. If you've generally heard of the national education policy, you would definitely have heard of something called ECCE, early childhood care and education. Ever? Yes or no? Generally, yes. In fact, our entire, you could say, national education policy has entirely been restructured on this principle itself. Our entire national education policy, our entire school system has been restructured on this policy. Simple as that. Correct? Good. So, largely speaking, the access to early childhood care and education will ensure that there is a greater transition to school education. Now, please understand, why is early childhood care and education important? And visualize it in our own rights. Think of it. There are several studies that have proven that the maximum cognitive development of a child would mostly happen at the early stages of life. And if at the early stages of life they are not able to get access to some form of education, nobody is teaching them complex things, but some form of education, it will be disastrous. Think, think of it. A lot of who we are A lot of what we do is nothing but an extension of what we were back in school. Life hasn't changed much. Our basic IQ and our basic cognitive development is fairly set at that time, right? Good. So that is what we're effectively looking at in that context. Are we clear on this? Yes. So early childhood care therefore becomes very, very important in that context. This is a subset of goal one. So again, our aim is 100%. We have not set a dedicated target for it because we've just started to on policy focus on this from NEP 2020, nutrition support, 10 other aspects. Absolutely. Okay, good. Are we clear on this? Do we make sense? Good. That, but no. Apart from this, equal access for all men and women to be able to attend quality technical, vocational university education. Now, for that, we'll have to look at gross enrollment in education or gross enrollment ratio within the age group of 18 to 23. And our target is that at least 50% of that age group of everybody who's between 18 to 23 should be able to to be able to have some form of access to something in higher education. Our current state of affairs is about 28.4%. Are we okay with this? Are we fine with this? Yes. Good. Now, apart from this, another goal that I think you need to know is gender related because it is cross sectional in nature. So, generally, gender related aspects that you need to know are what is called gender parity index. What does gender effectively tell you? It is you have to remove all forms of gender disparities in all levels of education, ensuring everybody across gender barriers has some fair degree of access, for which we generally use what is called gender parity index. Okay. Now, the gender parity index in school education, I think we've done very, very well. For higher education, of course, there's still a lot more to do. This gender parity index, important for the prelims also, is an indicator which is released by UNESCO. Okay. It's a socio-economic indicator which basically measures the relative access to education, primary, secondary, tertiary, higher, whatever, of males and females. The formula of gender parity index is very simple. Remember how price elasticity used to work in economics? Very similar principle. So female value of indicator divided by male value of indicator. Now, if the GPA is 1, it represents gender parity. If the GPA is less than 1, it represents parity in favor of men. If the GPA is more than 1, it represents parity in favor of women. Are we clear on this? And in some countries, zero point 0.9 to 1.03 is considered relatively to be parity. Do we understand this? Yes or no? Make sense? Good. These small tidbits can be asked in the prelims, so we have to be a little careful about these things. Are we okay? Do we understand this? Yes. Good. So primarily, this is what we need to fundamentally fix in education. See, apart from this, if you look at other aspects in terms of what we're up to and all of those things, there is a lot more that also goes on. I'll give you some context to SDGs. So right now, when we've looked at an average national assessment of our performance, today, if you attach it with, say, persons with disability, about 19.3%, and you can make this 20% is no problem. Persons with disability 15 years and above. Everyone who's 15 years and above and is a person with disability, 15% of those have completed at least secondary education. Okay. Second, our current literacy rate is 76.7% for people above 15 years of age. And literacy is your ability to read and write any of the languages in any recognized language and read and write alphabets and numbers. Do we understand this? Clear on this? Yes. Great. Now, I'm going to give you a small little hack. The hack is the government maintains outstanding databases. One is UDICE, Unified District Information System on School Education. Second is AISHE, All India Survey on Higher Education. Everything that you need to know about school and college education in India as a whole is right here. So the trick is, right before your mains exam, maybe in the month of June, just quickly glance through this data and you will have the most updated data to write in your answers. Right? To give you some context, as per UDICE, today in India, government, private, everything included, we've got about 14.7 lakh schools in India. Correct? Now, it also helps you solve a lot of, dissonance problems. We would think a lot of these schools are going to be in urban India, but out of these, only 2.6 lakh schools are in urban India and about 12.1 lakh schools are in rural India, because also the expanse is higher. Okay. So, should we generally not know the number of schools in India? Should we generally not know the number of school teachers in India? We have approximately 1 crore teachers in India. And here is the fun part. about 46 lakh teachers are female, and about 40 no 48 lakh teachers are male, and about what is my date? Sorry, 46 lakh teachers are male and about 54 lakh teachers are female. So do we have more number of female teachers than male teachers? Yes. Makes sense? Now can I use this in gender in paper one? But also at the same time, do we see them progressing enough? Do we see them doing a full career tenure? No. Because a lot of times the attrition rate amongst them is higher. There are the more number of female teachers leave teaching in the country simply because they are often made to focus on their domestic responsibilities which are imposed on them. Then, what about students? As of today, we have about 24.6 crore students in schools, out of which there are 12.7 crore boys and about 11.9 crore girls. Do we understand this? Good. Data is so analytical in nature. From a 96% enrollment in primary, we drop down to 90% in middle, we drop down to 68-69% in secondary, we drop down to 35-40 in senior secondary, and just about 30% in college. Yes or no? Make sense? So whenever you study a sector, you should be able to answer some basic questions. Think like a policy maker. How many schools do we have? How many teachers do we have? How many students do we have? And in terms of schools, there are more number of government schools than there are private schools. But this equation changes in higher education, where there are more number of private institutions than government institutions. In fact, this is often called the paradox of education in our country. While most number of schools are government schools, we would want children to go to private schools. But here, when most number of universities are, private, we want children to go to government. So this is called the paradox of education. So the preference is not based on quantity. The preference is based on quality, which is where education quality matters a lot. In health, it is about access to health more than quality of healthcare. First, make sure healthcare is reaching to everybody. But in education, bad quality education is as bad as no education. Because the results and the outcome of it are fairly unknown. The context of it is fairly unknown. So that kind of an analysis has to be built in from day one. That kind of an analysis has to be built in from day one. Are we clear on this? Do we understand this? Good. Now, this is schools. Some basic that we should generally know about colleges, and please explore these. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Today, if you look at UDAS, and higher education is a very interesting way to look at in terms of institutions. It is living proof that quantity of infrastructure does not matter. To give you some context, when we had become independent, India had barely 35 universities and about 700 colleges. 35 universities and about 700 colleges. As of today, we have about 1,395 universities. We have close to 54,000, 53,219 colleges. They're generally affiliated to universities. There are about 16,572. They're called SAIs, stand-alone institutions. Hotel management, institutes under ministries, nursing, paramedical, teacher training, polytechnic also, I think. Clear? There are, I don't know if you've heard of something called PM Vidya Lakshmi. Yes, what is it? It's nothing but basically free education loan for good students for higher education in top quality institutions. Right? Good. Also, 3% interest subvention for families with an income up to 8 lakhs. Completely digital scheme covers tuition, living, all other expenses, everything. Okay, good. So very very important. And then you have your around 263 R&D institutions. This is the state of higher education in India. This is the intensity of higher education in India. Isn't it so? The absolute intensity of higher education. Yet, we don't make it to the top 100 ever. India today is the second or the third largest higher education system in the world. And China and us started around the same time in terms of really, spending on higher education. And Chinese higher education is done extraordinarily well, right? Also, at the same time, these numbers are massive. And amongst these, there are more private institutions than government ones. Do we understand this? Yes or no? Good. So, this is where we are. This is the larger data set. With this, now tell me honestly, isn't this enough to generally look at how education should be, your data sets around education? Yes. and just recycling it different aspects, different areas, wherever required. Clear? Good. So our and you cannot study education or any social sector without the data behind it. Now that we understand the data behind it, let us now look at our policy arrangement, our framework, and all of those things. Okay? Good. Now, overall on the policy side, we want to look at basically three, four things. One, we're going to look at constitutional provisions. We're going to look at some other laws. We're going to look at some ministries. One second. We're going to look at who the ministries are. We're going to look at any other bodies or agencies involved. And we will look at a larger set of schemes. This is our broad framework. Nothing more required than this. Okay. Let's start in 3 minutes. I'll just quickly, just give me 3 minutes. I'll just quickly freshen up. 3 minutes, we can start. Okay. I have to just stand for a few minutes every few hours because unfortunately I've hurt my leg also. So that's okay, Satvik. I'm not doing anything unholy. Give me 2 minutes. So capex effectively means spending money on very large capital expenditure, right? It's not about the intensity of expenditure, Abhinandan. It is also a lot about where you're spending that kind of money, right? So that is the larger aspect. Clear? And yes, one of the biggest paradoxes with education is you classify it as revenue. Government's justification is that we are spending more on qualitative aspects and not infrastructural aspects. That is clear. And if you want to get into the details of it, it is because a large chunk of our education spending is consumed by paying of salaries, maintenance of schools. A lot of administrative expenses are recurring, which is why very often education is classified as a revenue expenditure. Clear? In fact, I don't know if you heard of something called HCF, human capital formation. So the impact of education long term is that it leads to human capital formation. So technically that could also be the case. Clear? Make sense? Good. Now, see, when we look at education today, what is effectively driving anything and everything that we're doing in education is a larger policy called the National Education Policy 2020, right? Which is going to govern all our policy decisions with respect to education. Now, interestingly, education is in the concurrent list. It used to be in the state list, was migrated to the concurrent list via the 42nd Amendment of 1976. But the story does not end here. This concurrent list is subject to the union list as well, where regulation of higher education is mentioned. So it creates a very interesting federal chamber that, for example, state universities can exist as per state norms, but they will have to conform to your national university regulation standards. Do we understand this? Are we clear on this? Does it make sense? So that is the aspect, and that is what is largely clear. Good. Now, in that context, we understand education. When I look at core constitutional provisions, while yes, Article 21 is the first thing that comes to our mind, Article 21A, which was inserted by the 86th Constitutional Amendment 2003, it gives you the fundamental right to education, which is complemented by the Right to Education Act, supplemented by State Right to Education Acts, and both of them are supplemented with certain rules. Now, do we understand how the federal aspect comes into play? 21A gives you the fundamental right to education. Right to Education Act is your central model right to education law with some scope of, flexibility, autonomy given to states. So states can have their own right to education. Clear? The idea of giving a right to education is an application of nothing but a rights-based approach in development and governance. Remember rights-based approach? Where citizens are treated not just as beneficiaries or charity cases. Citizens are often treated in their own right, in their own mind. The citizens are often treated as rightful legal entitlement holders, as stakeholders. Clear? So, this is number one. It is not just a model law. The states will make a law adopting similar provisions, and wherever there is a flexibility given to states in terms of, say, teacher-student ratio, etc., the states can have their own, methods. Like, for example, in terms of how the kids are to be admitted under right to education. That is all. Now, apart from this, you've got Article 45, which is Directive Principles of State Policy. Originally, it spoke of education till 14 years, but the same 86th Amendment changed it because you can't have it as an optional entity in DPSP and something compulsory under Article 21A. So, therefore, now DPSP reads Early Childhood Care and Education for up to 6 years, which is in line with your NEP, which is in line with your, your SDG goals as well. Clear? Apart from this, Article 51A subclause K also is creating an obligation for parents and students, parents and guardians to provide educational opportunities between 6 to 14. The trivia is that 86th Constitutional Amendment of 2003, 2002-2003 is in fact the only constitutional amendment which amends a fundamental right, a directive principle, and a fundamental duty at the same time. Do we understand this? Are we clear on this? Makes sense? Good. Federal aspect we've understood. Basically saying education is a concurrent list. Both union and state can legislate. And in any case, Article 254, in case of a conflict, union laws will prevail. And technical education, higher education standards are governed by the union. So your professional councils, bar council, etc., etc. I'll come to that in just a bit. Clear? Now, apart from this, Articles 29 and 30 would also have a fundamental bearing on education. Because Article 29 speaks of protection of language, script, and culture. And it also gives you the right to conserve your cultural identity. What is the simplest and the most powerful way to conserve your cultural identity? It is through education, right? Article 30 very specifically deals with religious and linguistic minorities and gives them the right to establish or administer education institutions of their choice the way they want to. In fact, Article 30, as you know, the state also cannot discriminate against institutions while granting them aid. So, the understanding here is that while there is some reasonable regulation that the state can give, you read through judgments of TMA Pai and PA Namdar, there is some reasonable regulation allowed. But the state cannot take over the management autonomy of these minority educational institutions. Right? Then if you see equity-based provisions, and equity-based provisions would effectively come down to these aspects. So, one of the most underrated articles is Article 15, Clause 1, which says that the state cannot discriminate between citizens on the basis of caste, religion, race, sex, and place of birth. And 15.2 also says, you generally can't discriminate whilst access to public spaces. So 15.1 is a non-discrimination article. So the state cannot discriminate. They cannot discriminate with respect to educational institutions also. And articles 15.4 and 15.5 and 15.6 deal with education reservation, which basically permit the state to allow for reservation in educational institutions. Does it make sense? Yes. Good. Just a drop down, just a sprinkling of what we studied in Article 15. Apart from this, some articles that are underrated but are important. You may have heard of Article 350A and 350B. Now, Article 350A is to promote an instruction in mother tongue, especially at the primary stage for at least linguistic minorities. And 350B generally deals with a special officer for linguistic minorities. So the law looks at education and language very, very closely. Do we understand this? Yes or no? Make sense? Good. So this is largely what our ecosystem is. This is largely our constitutional basis. On the basis of of what has been laid out in the constitution, there are going to be certain bodies in place. There are going to be certain laws in place. So let's understand what they are. And a lot of the education bodies also tend to be what are called statutory bodies. They're backed by law. Are we clear on this? Do we understand this? Yes or no? Good. So it is always better to study law and bodies together. Okay? Some of the bodies are statutory bodies. In fact, most bodies tend to be statutory bodies. Now, with respect to Article 21, we've got the Right to Education Act. And we've got a body called the National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, which does a lot of other aspects of child welfare, but also monitors the implementation of the Right to Education Act. Correct? Yes. Second, remember in Article 23 we had read the Child Labor Protection and Regulation Act. Yes, 1986, which supports technically education by preventing child labor, especially in those sensitive ages. That under the age of 14, the only kind of work you can do is audiovisual and family business, ensuring that your school education is taken care of, ensuring that your school education is not hampered. That is the fundamental premise. Good. Third, not a directly related law, but adds a lot of panache to your answers. We've heard of the Juvenile Justice Act 2015. In one line, it does provide. So you got juvenile justice rehabilitation centers, and education must be provided to these care homes where juveniles are being placed. Make sense? Yes. Good. So school education, the core laws are these. Now, most of us come from the CBSE board. Isn't that the case? Most of us come from the CBSE board, right? Good. So, is CBSE a statutory body? Is there, have you heard of anything called the CBSE Act? Remember, education is in the concurrent list. So, you will have Central Board for Secondary Education. You will have your state boards as well. India also allows for international boards. These are recognized by the center, right? The CBSE, of course, is one of the oldest boards in the country, but this reflects your federal balance. And then you have autonomous agencies like NCERT, the National Council for Educational Research and Training, whose fundamental job is to determine curriculum. What is CBSE's job? Is to manage the schools on a larger affiliation criteria. Do we understand the difference between CBSE and NCERT? NCERT strictly focuses on curriculum and CBSE focuses on supervision of schools. Also to look at whether NCERT curriculum is followed in these schools. Yes or no? Make sense? See, Abhinandan, you're sitting with the damn Google Chrome next to you and you're just Googling questions and asking them in class. Is very impolite of you. You think I don't know the answers to these questions? And you think you can ask these questions to yourself later? What kind of a behavior is this? And if you do this on purpose, then I feel very sorry for you. Yes or no? Then, if there's a question to why, think of it before you ask. If you don't know, wait. These are very good questions, I don't doubt it. But please wait. This is not a confrontational mechanism. Anyway, so we look at CBSE and we look at NCERT, look at the core nature of functions. NCERT, and if you remember our lecture on class on Article 12, if you remember carefully, I told you NCERT is not even considered state because of how autonomous it is. So while NCERT primarily focuses on curriculum, the Central Board for Secondary Education looks at a larger set of compliances, infrastructural compliances, teaching compliances, it looks at facility compliances, and so on and so forth. Right? Make sense? Now, so school education would largely be functioning on this. Why is the CBSE registered as a society? Is largely because it is autonomous, it is non-profit, and it seems like it's a private entity, but it is really not. Okay, are we clear on this? Do we understand this? Yes. Abhinandan, makes sense. While the CBSE is a society, it is completely controlled, owned, managed by the government. Clear? Yes. And today, between school and colleges, something very popular you would have heard of is NTA, the National Testing Agency. Back in the day, CBSE used to also conduct a bunch of entrance exams to colleges. Some of you may have heard of, your elder brothers or sisters or cousins talking about CBSE AIPMT or CBSE PMT, right? Today, that does not happen anymore. Today, CBSE does not conduct any entrance level tests. They're only concerned with your board tests or regulation of schools. Clear? Good. Make sense? Good. So this is largely how your school education system is set. Higher education is even more complex. No. I don't doubt your intent at all. But I mean, and then, but we're in the flow of things. Yes, just that. What you can do, just drop your questions. And you just keep your questions with you. Towards the end, just put them all together and answer them all. Don't worry. Okay. Even if they're beyond the context of the exam, I'll answer them for you. I'm sorry if I was a little harsh. Anyway, okay. Now, let's come to higher education. And regulation of higher education is another headache. It is, in fact, the most complicated. Are we clear till now here? Is this all okay? Do we broadly understand this and this? We don't need to know anything more than this, but do we understand this? Yes? Good. Now, 100% this is easy to go. Good. Now, the reason we need to know this is because you've asked questions from here in the prelims. There's been a question on teacher training in the prelims as well. There has been a question on what kind of tests do teachers have to clear. So, of course, in the school education system, we've got three layers of teachers. PRT grades, who teach primary. TGT is still class 10th. And PGT is 11th and 12th. More often than not, these are not very categorically divided across states. For example, in the case of Delhi, you've done a B.Ed and then you've done another qualifying certification that will give you permission to teach till class 8th, but not till 10th. There are often gaps between teacher grades and educational qualifications. You have something called Bachelors of Education, which is under reform. The NEP had recommended it to be about for 4 years. The Bachelors of Education program is nothing but a teacher training program. It's a teacher training degree. It teaches you how to teach. That's the purpose of it. Okay. And you have your national teachers eligibility test and you have your state teachers eligibility test depending on which school you are trying to join. Generally, the standards of testing are nationally uniform. Okay. And these are massive exams, by the way. Okay, good. Now, you should look at the regulation of higher education. It also becomes slightly more important right now because if you've been following the news, they've tabled a new higher education bill. I don't know if you the Higher Education Commission of India bill. That is why it becomes slightly more important in that context. Okay, good. Let's start. Let's understand first higher educational institutions. Let's first understand higher educational institutions. What are these and how are they created? Very important. See, First, higher educational institutions by ownership in terms of who owns them. You've got central, you've got state, and you've got private. Clear? Important aspect. Universities are considered to be quasi-judicial institutions in their own capacity because they decide on a lot of academic and other decisions of students. So institutions will be backed by a certain law. Give you an example. All central universities will be backed by a Central Universities Act or a specific act for that central university. Similarly, state universities will be backed by a State University Act. What about private? The most basic thing you require to set up a private university is a bunch of land. Land is a state subject, so that recognition through law comes through the state. So, for example, Amity University. Amity University has a campus in UP, has a campus in Karnataka. Both the UP and the Karnataka Legislative Assembly will pass an Amity University UP and Karnataka Act respectively, recognizing the university as a functional institution. Are we clear on this? So generally you will see these to be regulated by acts, and only universities are regulated by acts. Okay. Then you have in terms of hierarchy. At the top of the chain is a university. Then there is a deemed to be university. There is an autonomous college, and then there are colleges. The difference between the four is a difference of power. So colleges will generally have academic powers, or you see, some administrative powers. Autonomous colleges will have some academic and some administrative powers. Deemed to be university will have academic, administrative, and some higher degree of autonomy. And universities get to be your degree awarding institutions. The difference between university and deemed to be university is university is a permanent recognition. Deemed to be university needs to be revised every few years. Okay. Now, so what is the actual practical difference? So a college can, do their own recruitment of teachers, professors. They can have timetables their own way. Not have a lot of core academic freedom, but academic management freedom. Autonomous colleges will have to, participate in university exams, but also they can do their internals their own way. They can have more flexibility in curriculum. Deemed to be universities are far more, flexible in their nature. They're far more autonomous. They can devise their own courses, have their own recruitment, have their own admission process. Such is the case with universities also. What India basically follows is a university collegiate system, where colleges are constituent units of universities. Colleges are effectively ingredients of universities. Okay, does it make sense? Right? Now, what happens as an outcome of this, what happens because of this is colleges must be affiliated to a university for them to be able to be recognized. A university can exist without a college, but a college cannot exist without a university. Are we okay with this? Yes. Then you have universities in terms of the nature of education that they give. And this is technical, this is type of education. So there's general education, there's technical education, and there is professional education. So technical education is generally management, engineering, computer applications. Professional education is anything that requires you to have a certificate or a license to work. Medicine, law, nursing, aviation, company secretaryship, company chartered accountancy, stuff like that. General education, on the other hand, is education which is everything else. The funny part is, physics in India is general education, but engineering is technical education. Economics is general education, but MBA is technical education. So the difference is this, that general education is regulated by the UGC Act. Technical education is regulated by the All India Council of Technical Education. And professional educations are generally regulated through professional councils. Bar Council of India, National Medical Commission, National Council for, let's say nursing, Board of Architecture, stuff like that. Are we okay with this? Yes. And then there are some special cases where, let's say, first is institutions of national importance. They get priority in higher education funding. They get supremely high autonomy. They are generally science and technology based, and they don't need to be a university to give a degree. Okay, so your IITs, AIMS, School of Planning and Architecture, these are generally called institutions of national importance. Then you have institutions of excellence. Then you have institutions of excellence. Now, what happens is, there's institutions of excellence and there's institutions of eminence. Excellence is where you can get additional funding and some relaxation and some reservation policies and stuff. Institutions of excellence is not very highly spoken of these days. It's okay. IIMs are an institution of excellence. Institution of eminence is a larger game. Today, several government and several private universities have been given the target to perform better in international rankings. And government institutions are going to get funding and autonomy to do this. Private institutions are going to get simply more autonomy to do this. Okay. If you're already in the top 100, then you can give us the timeline in terms of how do you want to get better than a top 100 rank. Clear? So institutions of eminence would be, most of your IITs, ISC, your Banaras Hindu University, BITS, if you've heard of. Yes. Very interestingly, Shivnadar, Manipal, a lot of these are also institutions of eminence. OP Jindal is an institution of eminence as well. Are we okay with this? Makes sense? Good. I already explained institutions of excellence is where you get some relief from reservation benefits, some funding, some one-time grant. That's it. It's just a recognition exercise. Okay, Abhinandan? ठीक है. Now, do we see the problem? Do we see how complex higher education is? Now, do we see how complex higher education is? Which is why in December 2025, the government has introduced what is called Viksit Bharat. Everything starts with Viksit Bharat now. Shiksha Anusandhan Bill of 2025, which is nothing but a newer version of something already pending called the Higher Education Commission of India, which was an idea to basically merge all of these except legal and medical education because of the multiplicity of it. Unfortunately, India also does not discriminate between layers of education. Undergraduate and postgraduate education are two very different things. But we do not have any separate regulatory frameworks for it, which is also what the NEP has largely tried to solve. To restructure higher education and say there are undergraduate institutions, teaching institutions, research institutions, and so on and so forth. So basically, what the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Anusandhan Bill wants to do is to replace the UGC, replace the All India Council for Technical Education, replace the National Council for Teacher Education. Remember setting standards for teacher tests? Clear on this? These are the three very specific agencies that they will repeal. Are we clear on this? Yes or no? So UGC Act, AICTE Act, and NCTE Act, they will be repealed once this has been passed. Okay. Now, in higher education, there is of course regulation, which also has an element of accreditation. Accreditation is to ensure you are complying to certain standards on a regular basis. For that, we used to have something called the NAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. The problem with NAC was A, it was not compulsory, and B, half the people didn't get it. So now they want to, make NAC a very continuous and a very, very thorough exercise. So they are going to merge NAC council functions here also. So the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Anusandhan Bill will have a regulatory council, which will be a common regulator for UGC, AICTE, and National Council for Teacher Education. It will have an accreditation council to look at the system of accreditation. Maybe NAC will work under this. And third is that you'll have a standards council, which will determine academic standards. Are we clear on this? Do we understand this? Yes. Good. Now, the interesting part to this is UGC was not just a regulator, UGC was also a financer for colleges. So, a lot of the government colleges used to get money from UGC. Now that UGC will be repealed and this body is going to have these powers, the law is very clear that they will not have any funding powers whatsoever. So, if there's no UGC, and they don't have funding powers. So the question is who does? The answer to who does is the government. A greater problem is going to be the government. And if the government has direct control over university funding, there could be larger issues of autonomy. And our dearest GNU, although GNU now been doing okay, but a bunch of them are going to get a little problem. Are we okay with this? Yes. While India has one of the largest universities in the world, we also tend to have one of the largest number of fake universities in the world. And while the UGC can issue guidelines and notices and everything, we needed a stronger enforcement mechanism, which the Higher Education Commission of India should be able to do. That's what the larger aim is, to very clearly and independently penalize. Otherwise, what is happening is you would have to go through the parliamentary route or the judicial route to really solve a lot of these problems. Correct? Makes sense? Yes or no? Good. So, is policy is clear? Good. Education is slightly important. This is we'll have to be a little thorough with this. Good. I just checked the server availability. If yes, then possible. If not, then we definitely have twin classes tomorrow. I want to finish social justice. Health takes an hour and a half. Skill development takes an hour, and I want to do poverty and hunger also for an hour and a half. Is that okay with you, Sathi? Is that fine? Good. Because we are also uploading IR lectures, they should be visible to you by tonight. And then we'll do live classes also if you feel like. That also option is available. But I just wanted to give a bunch of IR lectures also because they're foundational in nature. Okay, cool. Done. Thank you.